Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Indus Women Health, I welcome all the viewers to this live and exclusive talk on medical aspects of COVID-19. Today's speaker is Mr. Mahendra Kumar Bajpayee, who is advocate in Supreme Court of India, standing counsel, the medical attorneys, editor, medical law cases for Dr. and honorary director of Institute of Medicine and Law. Before I hand over the session to Mr. Bajpayee, I would like to announce and unveil the India's exclusive COVID-19 medical helpline to assist you in clearing your doubts regarding emergencies, antenatal care, COVID-19 patients and management, and many other facts whenever you need help. With this helpline, doctor will get real-time and quick directive from the panel of most sought-after medical experts headed by Mr. Bajpayee. With this, I hand over the session to Dr. Sonal Mehta to introduce the speaker and start the session. Madam, you need to unmute your mic. Sonal, madam, please unmute your mic.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Satpathy. Now we will be starting the webinar on medical aspect of COVID-19. With this, I hand over to Ms. Shilpa. And before that, you all the viewers are requested to put that questions to the chat box, and we will have a question answer session following the talk. Over to you, ma'am. Hello. Hello. Live?
Dr. Bajpayee, you can start now.
Yes, Bajpayee sir, please start.
My screen is visible?
Yes, sir, visible. Please start, sir.
Dear doctor friends, a very good morning. We are going to discuss something about law.
Hello. Hello. સાંભળો ને હા વ્યુઅર લિંક માં દેખાય છે કન્ફર્મ કર્યું તમે કારણ કે એમાં 4 વાગ્યાનો ટાઈમ બતાવતો હતો.
Your voice is coming. So friends, these are technological glitches. We have to live with them. Friends, we are going to discuss law, and very specifically law relating to medicine. For the past few years, law has been a cause of concern for doctors in India. And not without reason. But today we are not going to discuss those reasons. But we will discuss laws that are relevant, that are applicable to medical practice in this pandemic. We all are aware the pandemic is far from over. In fact, what doctors and researchers say is that in India it has yet not reached the peak. So let us be aware. What happens when we are unaware about the law? Friends, to illustrate a very unfortunate incident from Punjab. A mother calls a pediatrician. She wants to consult him for her young child. The request is sent on WhatsApp. The reply is sent by the pediatrician on WhatsApp. he denotes that he is ready. For a teleconsultation, he also quotes his fees. Fees during normal hours and fees outside those normal hours. Next day morning, the family goes and files an FIR against this pediatrician. Pediatrician for asking fees on a telephone. And this happens after the telemedicine practice guideline has been notified. This happens after the telemedicine practice guideline says a doctor has all the rights to charge his fees. Perhaps the pediatrician was not aware of the law, of the rights, of the privileges that were bestowed upon him by law. Policemen, that's a different story. They are law keepers. They don't know law. It's condonable. So friends, that is why we must know law. Our rights, our duties, our responsibilities. Three very important legal developments have taken place. All three applicable to medicine and important for all specialties. In fact, we often say law is specialty neutral. March 2020, a 120-year-old law is invoked. These are emergency laws. They are always kept in the cupboard. And as and when an emergency arises, they are invoked. This law is invoked. Today, all the states, all the union territories in India are passing orders relating to COVID-19 under this law. Law made by Britishers. Law made 120 years back to contain epidemic that had spread at that point in time in Bombay. Still relevant. Second legal development. Friends, the telemedicine practice guidelines were notified. India has been waiting for these guidelines for the last 20 years. In 2000, the first telemedicine clinic was inaugurated in a remote village in Andhra Pradesh by the then President of United States, Bill Clinton. We were ahead of times. Today we are far behind. And one reason happens to be lack of regulations. There are other reasons also. But thanks to this COVID, these regulations, these guidelines were notified. Today, telemedicine is regulated in this country. Perfectly legal. And not stopping there. The regulator, MCI, within 15 days of bringing this guideline into existence, they modified it. They added 3 psychiatric drugs in the list of permitted drugs, drugs that could be prescribed using telemedicine. Very swiftly. Unheard of. The regulators, the authorities acting so swiftly. And friends, as far as swiftness is concerned, the third legal development. In 2 days, the government brought a new ordinance. Ordinances are laws, temporary laws. An unfortunate incident happened with a doctor in Chennai. And at midnight, on 22nd April 2020, His Excellency, the President of India, signed an ordinance on violence against doctor. One of the strictest laws, strictest criminal laws in India has been brought into force. And friends, today we will discuss very briefly all these 3 legal developments and also discuss how they are relevant to our specific practice, the practice of obstetrics and gynecology. The Epidemic Diseases Act. Today, all the orders that are being passed by the government of India, by your state government, by your Zilla Parishads, by all statutory authorities. They are passed under this 120-year-old Act. Section 2 gives a power to the states to invoke it. All the states have invoked it. Section 2(1), it gives the authorities right, privilege to take special measures, to prescribe regulations. And they are doing so. What is relevant for doctors is Section 3 and Section 4. Friends, under Section 2, authorities are giving orders. Under Section 3 of this Act, every person is bound to obey the orders. And if you see the advisories, notifications coming out from the authorities, 60 to 70% are directed towards doctors, towards hospitals. You must be aware of them. You must make conscious efforts to know them, how they would be applied in your practice. You have to follow them. Because if you fail to follow them, there are penal consequences. Imprisonment, fine. That is what Section 3 says. So there is a positive duty cast upon you. But at the same time, friends, law is also protecting you. Section 4 of this Act. Whenever you have acted under the directions of the authority in this pandemic, you are protected. No person can bring a civil suit against you. And not only civil suits, your criminal complaints, your complaints before the consumer courts, absolute bar is there. You are protected, you are indemnified. This is a right that law has given to you. Friends, not only the 6 months punishment that the Epidemic Diseases Act says, there are 2 other provisions of law that a doctor could attract. If you are acting negligently, if you are acting malignantly, spreading you have this COVID-19, an act of omission, an act of commission, they are all crimes. Section 269, Section 270 of the Indian Penal Code. You may be punished for that. Maximum imprisonment of 2 years. So be careful. The 2 take-home messages, 2 very important key learnings, key take-home messages that you should remember. Number 1, keep yourself informed about the directions that are coming from the government, from the authorities. You have to follow them. Bound by law to follow them. And friends, do not fear law. Discharge your duties fearlessly. No one will be able to sue you when you have discharged your duties in good faith in this pandemic. Law has protected you. Friends, the second topic, the second legal development, Telemedicine Practice Guidelines 2020. In fact, most of the time that has been allotted to me, we will try to update ourselves, because this is a permanent development that has happened. Unlike the 2 other developments, the ordinance as well as the Epidemic Diseases Act, the epidemic goes, these laws will go away, but this law will remain. It's a wonderful tool that law has given in your hand. And friends, before I come on telemedicine, for obstetricians and gynecologists, this is a tool that you can use. This is a tool that is required today in India. The deaths that are happening during pregnancies, if even one death you are able to avoid, if you are able to stop and prevent using telemedicine, you have done your job. So let us understand it. And understand it in the right perspective, how it is going to be useful to us, to our specialty. So friends, these guidelines were notified by the Board of Governors of the now superseded Medical Council of India, a body that is neither dead nor alive, but nevertheless that body has acted today. 20 years we were waiting for something, it came very swiftly. And these guidelines form a part of your IMC Regulations 2002, the law that regulates your conduct. A new section 3.8 has been added. And now using telemedicine is legally permissible. It is legally regulated. You can use it for consultation, for counseling. You can use it for prescription. You can use it for health education. 3 very specific areas where you can use it. Definition of telemedicine, I will not bother you with that. It is for lawyers and courts, as and when a matter reaches the court. But some very important aspects of this guideline. A doctor can provide telemedicine consultation. He can give telemedicine prescription to a patient from any part in India. This privilege is not there with you in physical consultations. You have to be registered with the State Medical Council where you are practicing. That has been done away with. Doctor from any part of India, patient from any part of India. But friends, please remember, as an obstetrician, whether giving consultation to a patient who is very far off, does not have an RMP, does not have another doctor there, will you be able to provide proper antenatal care? You will have to apply your mind. Privilege has been given, but that privilege has to be used with responsibility. Application of mind. You take care of a pregnant lady, fair. If there is another doctor on the other side, maybe a junior doctor, maybe an MBBS, you have made excellent use of this technology. Otherwise, it is questionable. So friends, when this privilege has been given, when this right has been given to you, law has cast a duty on you. And that duty is to use the same standard of care that is applicable, that you provide during physical consultation. No leniency. And if you are found deficient somewhere, if you are found negligent somewhere, the way you are sued in physical consultations, here also you will be sued. Law will take its course. So a right and a duty has been given to you. Friends, one very interesting aspect. A very express written duty is cast on patients. Only one duty. There would be other unwritten duties, but a written duty. And that duty is to provide accurate information to the patient, complete information to the patient, correct information to the patient. Technology has its own limitations. And the lawmakers were aware of it. The next important aspect. Friends, this guideline says that this guideline has to be used in conjunction with other national standards, protocols, policies, laws. Now, what does this mean? It is something a bit legal. I'll try to explain it in simple terms. What this means is that for all your problems, for all your dilemmas, for all the questions that arise in practicing telemedicine, please don't look at these guidelines only. There are other laws. There are other codes. There are other SOPs. Some made by the government, some made by the regulators, other made by your professional associations, your medical association. Look at them also. You may not be able to find all answers to your questions in these telemedicine guidelines. It is not a complete code, but yes, on the issues, on the topics where these guidelines have said something, then obviously all other laws will not be applicable, only this law would be applicable. So for gynecologists, you have NTP Act. These guidelines have not overtaken it. You will have to follow it. PCPNDT Act. If at all you are doing sonography, you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep telemedicine practice guidelines also in mind. Perhaps that is one place where both would be applicable. If there is a void, perhaps the Information Technology Act 2020 would be applicable. Your IMC regulations 2000, they would be applicable. So for all your questions, answers will not come from telemedicine practice guidelines. This has been accepted by the lawmaker. All the three modes of communications known to modern technology, they have been permitted: video, audio, text. Video, you can use apps, chat platforms, Skype, FaceTime, phone, either a mobile or a landline, WhatsApp calls, permissible chats, your SMS messages, your emails, your fax, your WhatsApps, Google Hangouts, all this has been permitted. There are two modes of transmission, real time and delayed. You talk with the person on video and audio, it is real-time exchange of information. Even WhatsApp to a certain extent is real-time exchange of information. But emails and faxes, they are asynchronous, they are delayed exchange. Even that has been permitted. Friends, before we move further, we'll talk something about a new concept. New concept for lawyers, for courts, for the written law in India. Not a new concept for you. You were using these terms. He is a new patient, he has come down for the first consult, follow-up consult. But in the written law of India, these terms were not there. The telemedicine practice guidelines have introduced these terms. But before we understand these terms, let me make it very clear. These terms are useful. These terms should be applied only while prescribing medicines. We will deal with it in the later half of our presentation. Not otherwise. In all other aspects, these two terms are not applicable. So what is first consult? A new patient comes, first consult. Patient is consulting you after 6 months. Earlier consultation was 6 months back. First consult with a different condition, different health condition, or symptoms of a different health condition. Earlier, when the patient had come 3 months back, it was something else. Now this seems to be something else. Treat it as the first consult. And when you are not absolutely sure about what advice you had given earlier, what is it that you had counseled the patient? What was the diagnosis that you had arrived at? Treat it as first consult. And then whatever remains, that is follow-up consult. So a patient consulting within 6 months of previous in-person consultation with the same health condition, follow-up consult. For obstetricians, patient delivers a baby. After 4 months, she is again pregnant. Is it follow-up consult? No, certainly not. This is a first consult. So first consult in essence means new patient or with new condition, with new symptoms. This is first consult. Now a new concept has been added, which perhaps you were never aware of. Pause in consult. What is pause in consult? Pause in consult simply means that you have started a consultation. If it was a first consult, it was a follow-up consult. And then you advise the patient to bring in some investigation reports to consult another doctor. Patient again comes. After bringing those reports, In the eyes of law, under these telemedicine practice guidelines, it is a pause in consult. What it means is that the earlier consultation continues. If the earlier consultation was a first consult, this is a first consult. And friends, please don't mix it. Please don't use these concepts, especially in charging your fees. You have been given absolute liberty in these guidelines to charge your fees. Whether there is a pause in consult, first consult, follow-up consult, up to you. You can charge more fees for telemedicine consultation. You can charge less fees than what you charge in physical consultation. As far as this pause in consult is concerned, you may very well say, look, I will treat this as 2 consultations. You have that right. Absolute liberties. Only precaution that you must take is to disclose your fees, the mode in which you are going to charge the patient at the outset. And today technology will support you. A simple WhatsApp message. Antenatal care, this is my fee. I'll charge you lump sum for your 9 months. Permitted. You may come any number of times. But if you come for telemedicine consultation, I will charge you this much. And this consultation will only be for 10 minutes. If it goes beyond 10 minutes, I'll charge you this much. Permitted. You simply have to disclose. And disclose very transparent. Friends, 5 types of interactions are permitted under these guidelines. Patient to doctor, patient's attendants or relatives with doctor. Very important for obstetric practice. Many a times, patient's in-laws, patient's mother, patient's husband, they will consult you. It is permitted. What are the precautions that need to be taken? We will discuss that. Another healthcare worker. So there is a junior doctor on the other side. There is a nurse on the other side. There is a paramedic on the other side. Yes, they can consult you on behalf of that patient. Doctor to doctor consultation, yes, it is permitted. And in emergency situations, you can obviously use telemedicine. In fact, you must use it. For patients who are known to you, for unknown patients. Both the categories of patients. Friends, the heart of these telemedicine practice guidelines. The guidelines have laid down in no uncertain terms the guiding principles for telemedicine consultation, and they are absolutely clear. Your professional judgment will be the guiding principle for all telemedicine consultation. No one has a role to play. Patient, hospital administrators, patient's relatives, no one. Your decision, your professional judgment. And friends, when the law has honored you, has given you this privilege, has given you this right, a corresponding duty always arises. And the corresponding duty here is to use telemedicine responsibly, diligently, in good faith, for patients' benefit, for bona fide purpose. This guiding principle has to be used in deciding whether in this given situation, telemedicine would be appropriate or not. And this question is going to come to obstetricians every other day. The patient is in labor. Doctor, what should I do? You now have a mobile camera. You now have a video facility. You can use it. Should I not? Up till what extent? Friends, when to use telemedicine, when not to use telemedicine. That right is given to you. Your professional judgment. In fact, in the middle of a telemedicine consultation, once you have started, you can say, no, now I don't want to continue it. Please come. I want to physically check the patient. This is an emergency. Now I won't proceed. Please take this patient to the nearest maternity home. You must. Your professional judgment will be important. Law is concerned only about your professional judgment. Once you have justified reasons, you have applied your judgment, you have no one to fear. You will have to take a call whether telemedicine in such situation will be appropriate, will be sufficient, will be adequate. What is the mode? What will be the technology that I will have to use? What is it that I should use? Obviously, you also have to look into whether it is available on both the sides. You want to use a video phone. Patient is not having a smartphone. Your smartphone is not working. Now you have a simple handset. And friends, ultimately, you will always have to keep in mind that whatever you do, it has to be in the patient's interest. You are protected. You have no one to fear. 7 factors have been expressly laid down that you must take into account before any telemedicine consultation. And to these factors, you have to apply your professional judgment. Context, identification of doctor and patient, mode of communication, consent, type of consultation, patient evaluation, and patient management. On all these aspects, you have to apply your professional judgment. Friends, 4 procedural aspects we will discuss a little bit in detail. Why? Friend Durga Prasad ji has introduced me as a former editor of medical law cases for doctors. Friends, we have the complete database of reported judgments on medical negligence in India. An analysis done of these judgments brings us to one conclusion. Nearly 2/3 of the cases that are reaching the courts in India, the genesis happens to be either improper consent or improper documentation. Now, these are procedural aspects, friends, nothing to do with science of medicine. You forgot to sign on the prescription, you forgot to write the age or weight of the baby, you forgot to write follow-up advice on the discharge card, you are there in the court of law. So procedural aspects are a big cause of concern for doctors. And there are 4 important procedural aspects that you must keep in mind. When you practice telemedicine, we will discuss them in length. The first one, no anonymity between patient and doctor. Doctor has to identify the patient, patient has to identify the doctor. You can identify the patient by a name, age, address, email ID, phone number. A new patient comes, asks for an Aadhaar card, for a PAN card. Store it. This is the identification proof of that patient. Interestingly, identification of the doctor, this responsibility is also on your shoulders. So before every consultation, you have to disclose 4 bits of information to the patient. Your name, your qualifications, and qualifications only those that are recognized by NCI, not the other ones that you have. The registration number given by the State Medical Council and the State Medical Council that has given registration number. 4 bits of information must be conveyed to the patient. This is your identification before the patient. What mechanism you should use, it is up to you. On a video or audio call, you can just say these things. On your emails and faxes and WhatsApp, you can have this as your signature. Everything is permitted. You have to choose the mechanism, but you have to positively disclose it. And on prescriptions, receipts, and other communications that you will be sending, scanning or sending it through email, all these 4 bits of information have to be there. So no anonymity. Doctor-patient identification is mandatory. The second procedural aspect, you have to take patient's consent, compulsory. Now, friends, you are obstetricians, you are gynecologists. For various procedures, you keep on taking patient's consent. Don't confuse that consent with this consent. That is the consent for a procedure. It is very time consuming, very elaborate. You have to inform the patient, you have to counsel the patient, you have to give patient enough time to contemplate, then fill that consent form, which may be running into pages, disclose the risks, disclose the alternatives, and then take informed consent and perform the procedure. Here, nothing of that sort. Simple consent of the patient. Yes, doctor, I give you consent for this telemedicine. Enough. What should be the sentence? There can be any sentence. Patient under your antenatal care, you are consulting that patient on telemedicine and you say, I am identifying myself, I have identified you, now you please give consent. And she says, what doctor, what consent? My consent is always there. Why do you need a separate consent? Consent is there, deemed, given consent, express consent. So the format of consent is not prescribed, up to you. What mode do you use, that is up to you. You can take it on an email before starting telemedicine consultation. You can take it on an SMS or even on a video call or an audio call. This could be your first sentence. All that liberty has been given to you, but you will have to take a consent. Again, law has divided consent into two parts: implied consent and explicit consent, or implicit consent and express consent. What is implied consent? Here, these guidelines say if the patient has initiated the call, then it means that there is a consent on the part of the patient. You need not take it. But if you have initiated the call, if the patient's relatives have initiated the call, another healthcare worker has initiated the call on behalf of the patient, you will have to take consent, a positive consent and express consent. And this consent obviously has to be recorded in the patient's medical records. The third procedural aspect is in writing prescriptions. You can provide this prescription by taking a photograph, scanning, digital copy, e-prescription, any mechanism that you deem fit and proper. But three precautions have to be taken. One, you have to sign the prescription. Number two, friends, 18 years have passed since this IMC regulations 2002 has come. There is an annexure 2 in it, where a proforma has been laid down of how to take consent, how to write a prescription, I'm sorry. But doctors still date are not writing in that form. Now these guidelines again say you have to write in that format. And friends, please write it now. Why are we specifically discussing these 4 procedural aspects? For a reason. And the reason is, friends, now this will be digital. You may not be recording a conversation, the patient may be recording it. You have sent an email, you may have deleted it from your inbox, outbox, and all boxes. Patient may have kept it. And if you have done a mistake, it will be pointed out in the court of law. No defense. So please write prescriptions in the format that is provided in IMC regulations 2002. And the third precaution is when you are giving a prescription directly to a pharmacist, not to a patient, then you must tell positively to the patient that you have a right to send this prescription, to take this prescription and bring the medicines from a pharmacist of your choice. But if you want, I can transmit it to the pharmacist, and express consent has to be taken, and this has to be recorded also. The fourth aspect, and that is about maintaining medical records. You are maintaining medical records here also, you have to maintain. In physical consultation, it was in physical format. Here it will be in digital format. The reports, the investigation sheets, case history, images, scans, the prescriptions that you have sent, all that has to be stored. But there's one additional thing. You have to maintain logs. Now, what are these logs? So you will have to write a log book. 605, patient A speaks with me on telephone, teleconsultation. 6:15, patient A's husband speaks with me on teleconsultation. 10:30 in the clinic, patient C, I have sent a tele-prescription. You will have to write it. You will have to maintain logbook. In what format, it is up to you. It can be a simple diary, it can be on your mobile phone, it can be an Excel sheet or any other software that is available, but you will have to keep it. A logbook is required, mandated by these guidelines. There is one small shortcoming in this guideline, and this shortcoming is regarding the period for which you have to store this. It says that it has to be stored for the statutorily prescribed period. So which law should we be looking into? There is only one law, the ICIM Regulations 2002. And it prescribes a period of 3 years for preserving medical records. 3 years, medical records of a hospitalized patient, IPD patient. OPD patient, you need not keep any medical records. So most of the patients who will be consulting you on telephone, they are going to be OPD patients. Should you not keep any medical records? That is not advisable. Friends, please understand, as obstetricians, the risk period that you have in a case of medical negligence, the period in which a patient can sue you is 21 years, not 2 years or 3 years. Because a child who is born, he will become competent after 18 years, and then after that, the period of limitation. It's a very big period. So you have to be careful in preserving medical records. Here you should preserve it for 3 years. Probably the regulator will come with clarifications very quickly. Friends, now the general flow, we have discussed the procedural aspect. Call is initiated. Who has initiated it is important for consent. Then identification happens. Responsibilities on you, both for patient as well as for yourself. Consent is taken depending upon who has initiated the call. After that, for obstetricians, very important, you will have to assess the patient whether she needs emergency care or not. Emergency care, a different protocol has to be followed. In fact, even identification consent in some places you can do away with. And if it is not an emergency patient, then yes, exchange of information, patient evaluation, and patient management. This is the general framework. Now, some precautions for the 5 different settings that we have discussed. Doctor-patient. If the patient is consulting you for a follow-up, ensure that you have access to the patient's previous medical records. You cannot say in a court of law, look, I was in my annual conference and there the patient gave a call. How do you expect me to have access to the records? Then don't speak with the patient. Second interaction, patients, attendants, relatives. And here obstetricians will have to take some precaution. Something very unusual. Others may not require this. Whenever a patient comes for antenatal care, first time, you must ask the patient, record it somewhere, who all would be consulting you on her behalf. Why? Because the law here says that for telemedicine consultation, if an attendant or relative is consulting, the doctor has to ensure 2 things. One, authorization. So the patient authorizes this person will speak on my behalf. And second, identification. Emergencies are very common in the practice of obstetrics. In the middle of the night, the patient's husband gives you a call. Do you have an authority? You don't have an authority under the telemedicine practice guideline. So a very pragmatic approach. The patient comes for the first time. Please take authorization. Please take identification of all those who are going to speak with you. Now you don't have to fear about authorization, identification, consent. All that is done. Straight away, you can speak with the patient's husband. You have kept yourself prepared in advance. Friends, the third type of interaction, doctor with healthcare worker, a nurse, a paramedic, a junior doctor, ensure that this healthcare worker has personally seen, has personally examined, very important for obstetrics. Patient in labor in a rural setup, a healthcare worker is communicating with you. Ask her whether he or she is near the patient, has seen the patient, has examined the patient, then only proceed further, not otherwise. Friends, there are no restriction as far as doctor to doctor interaction is concerned. And in emergencies, which again are so very common in the practice of obstetrics, advise first aid, whatever you can do facilitate referral as quickly as possible. All the procedural aspects that are there, you can leave them aside. Law permits you, the general law of this country. Friends, a very important aspect of these telemedicine practice guidelines is that the medicines that can be prescribed using telemedicines, they have been put under 4 distinct lists. List OA, B, and the prohibited list. Prohibited list, you can never prescribe using telemedicine. When you can prescribe OAB, number 1, the types of medicines are listed there. Only those medicines can be prescribed. Then those medicines also can be prescribed depending upon the type of consultation. We have discussed the first consult and follow-up consult earlier. It will also depend upon whether it is a video consult or all other types of consult. Some parts in list A, some medicines can only be prescribed if there is a video consult. Now, this is very simple. You have to read that list and then prescribe. There is another big problem. Problem that MCI has the authority to modify this list of medicine. And friends, we have seen 25th March, these guidelines came, 11th April, it was modified. Within 16 days, these lists will keep on modifying, and you will have to keep yourself regularly updated on the medicines that are permitted, on the medicines that are prohibited, on the medicines that have been removed from the list. You forget to write a medicine today because you did not check the MCI website yesterday. And yesterday that medicine was permitted, you will not face much problem. But you have written a medicine today and yesterday it was banned by MCI. You are negligent in the eyes of law. So you have to keep yourself updated regularly in real time. There are some exclusions. Hardware, software, maintenance, data management, standards, all this is not covered in these guidelines. Consultation outside India, whether the doctor is outside or patient is outside, not covered. Again, a word of caution for obstetricians. Your patient who was under your antenatal care, after 6 months she goes out, is in a foreign country. Should you refuse? Should you not refuse? What should be the standard of care? Please don't apply your minds in all these things. Give her the same standard of care. Follow the same procedure, same protocol as if she is in India. Let us not complicate things. Although patients and doctors, either of them, if they are outside, these guidelines are not applicable. General laws are applicable. International laws would be applicable. Again, telesurgery, robotic surgery, they are not so very common in the practice of obstetrics and gynecology. But as and when they are introduced, they are not covered under these guidelines. This does not mean that they are illegal. A new set of guidelines may perhaps come. Friends, the MCI has said that they will be coming up with an online course within a period of 3 years. And after that, once that online course is made available, practicing telemedicine without doing this course is simply not permissible. But in the interim period, right from 25th March, you have all the rights and liberties to practice telemedicine. One big area of concern is patients' personal data, friends. All over the world, we see that there is a lot of noise being made about personal data. Laws are becoming stricter. And patients' personal data is sensitive personal data and information. SPDI, very, very, very crucial data. So how you get it, how you preserve it, how you destroy it, how you share it. Rules are going to come, rules are going to be stricter. This is one potential area where doctors may find them in soup. Some protection has been given in these guidelines, and they say that because of technology breach or because of another person, if there is a leakage of the patient's data, then the doctor will not be responsible. But at the same time, these guidelines are saying that the doctor must ensure a reasonable degree of care when you are hiring any service. Reasonable degree of care regarding patient's personal data. This is your responsibility, and you will have to prove it in a court of law. But as of now, friends, in this pandemic, please use telemedicine as far as possible for your safety, for the safety of your patients. The third law, ordinance, violence against doctors. Friends, number one, this is an ordinance. It is a temporary law. It will remain in force for 6 months. Secondly, it is also temporary because it is an amendment in the Epidemic Diseases Act. The day Epidemic Diseases Act is withdrawn, this law will come to an end. But nevertheless, friends, this law has been brought about. It has been drafted, promulgated in 2 days. 20th, the unfortunate incident happened. 22nd, this law was promulgated, and it is there to provide protection to doctors and nurses. Act of violence that has been defined in this act is too broad. Anyone harassing a doctor, even in his living place, in his working condition, it is act of violence. Intimidation is violence. And the punishment is from 3 years to 7 years. Fine from 50,000 to 5 lakh. Offense is cognizable, non-bailable. I will not trouble you with other provisions. But once a person is caught under this act, he will come out only after 1 year or 1.5 years after the trial is over. Because the offense is non-bailable, 90 days anyway he is not going to get bail. And by that time, this law says that trial must start on a day-to-day basis. He will not come out. This will act as a deterrent. Miscreants will think 10 times before indulging in violence against doctors and hospitals. Compensation also that has been provided for in this act is simply too great. In addition to that, 5 lakh, if a doctor has been hurt, grievous injury has been caused, additional compensation can be granted. If some property has been destroyed, damaged, twice the market value of that property, not the ready reckoner rates. And friends, once you get this order, you simply have to walk into the office of the collector, of your tehsildar, file it. They will get that money as arrears of land revenue very quickly. You don't have to file it in court and then wait for 5 years to get that money. Would come in months. The short point is, friends, this law is one of the toughest penal laws in India. Yes, it will remain in force only during this pandemic. It is temporary in nature. It is not the permanent law that doctors were asking for. But in this pandemic, it is going to provide doctors the much needed legal support against violence. Friends, thank you. Thank you for listening patiently. Now I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, sir, for giving us very insightful talk and important points of various aspects of the medical legal points. And there are some questions that they have plotted. One is, how can we keep record of landline phone consultation?
See, keeping records would mean that you write down whatever has transpired between you and the patient. The way you write medical records in your hospital, in your nursing home, in your day-to-day practice, you have to write it down that way. Or you can simply have a tape recorder. You can record that, keep that clip. This is the recording of my call with this patient. And these technologies are very cheap, easily available.
Right, sir. And second question is, can we do teleconsultation for new patient also?
Again, I want to clarify that concept of first consult and follow-up consult is not applicable to any other part of these guidelines. Yes, you can. A new patient who wants to consult you, certainly you can. Only you will have to ask for identification proof. If it is an old patient, he gives a call from a number that is known to you, you have identified the patient. But for a new patient, calling from a new number, You will have to take some identification proof. This is the only precaution that needs to be taken. Or rather, if you ask me, this is the only fetter that is there. Otherwise, there you can consult, you can provide a prescription to a new patient.
Correct, sir.
Yes.
Being a gynecologist, the patients are coming from MTP for MTP, and it is not an emergency situation. Should we offer the MTP or ask them to come following 15 days or maybe 1 month or so?
So this is with relation to COVID, if I think.
Yeah.
Now, relating to COVID, there are some conflicting. It would depend upon the area where you are practicing. General guidelines that have been given by the government of India, they are saying you should accept your patients and you should go ahead with it. Your normal non-emergency duties also you should be resuming. But some states, some municipal councils have come out with different guidelines with different advisories. You should look into what is it that is applicable in your state, in your area, in your city, and follow.
Correct, sir. And for informed consent form, are we required to have particular, by law, particular information to be kept for COVID-19?
So this again is a pan-India phenomenon. Let me share. So fair. See, doctors are taking consent from their OPD patients for COVID. What it means that if you have come to me for consultation, if you get infected, you will not sue me, or I am not responsible for that. These types of consent all over the country, doctors and hospitals are taking. Now, please understand, friends, this consent has no value in the eyes of law. So if you have taken, it is just a bit of paper, nothing beyond that. I will give you the legal reasons why I am saying so. In India, it is the patient who has to prove in the court of law that the doctor was negligent. Let us assume that a patient comes to you after going out, he is tested positively. How will the patient positively prove that he got infected only in your clinic? Not while coming, not while going back, not by any other means. And please understand, this is an emergency. The view, consistent view taken by courts in India has been that in emergency, if a doctor has acted, they are very, very liberal. So please don't take these consent. These are not going to help you. Counsel the patient, that is all that you should be doing. That's all.
Correct, sir. And when can we start infertility practice? What guidelines to follow during COVID?
Now see, infertility practice only when the lockup is gone and normal non-emergency practices started. At that time, you should be going ahead. Ultimately, it does not come under the definition and description of an emergency service. So you will have to wait.
Correct, sir. Can you refuse a relative of a patient in the absence of the patient for consultation, telemedicine?
You can and you must. If the authorization is not there and the identification is not there. If the patient has sent you an email, if you have, as I had suggested, for a patient who is pregnant, who is under your antenatal care, if you have taken in advance the authorization, if you have taken in advance the identification of all the relatives who can speak with you, what is the harm? There are then no fetters. You can, you must in fact. But yes, identification and authorization are two procedural aspects which are mandatory when someone other than the patient's attendants or relatives, they want to consult.
Correct,
Yes.
sir. Can time be limited for teleconsultation?
Absolutely, your choice. Friends, please remember, you are a professional. And professionals, they provide their time and their expertise, and for that they are charging. You can obviously keep a time limit. I will speak with you only for this minute. Beyond that, I will not speak, or beyond that, if I speak, I will charge this much. You have all the rights to do so.
Right, sir. And how to facilitate telemedicine in case of patients are from rural area and where the internet connectivity is poor?
So, yeah, now this will always be a cause of concern. But then please understand, the rural person who is not getting any medical help, if he gets some help from a qualified doctor in a city, not only will the patient be grateful to you, the system, the society will always be grateful to you, and even the courts. There is a legal doctrine, the doctrine of locality and schools. Now, what it says is that the standard of care that law expects from a doctor keeps on changing. So, a doctor who is practicing in a super specialty hospital, the standard of care that law expects from him is very higher. The ones who are there in the rural side, in semi-rural areas, the standard of care obviously is lower. Now, here you may be there in a super specialty hospital, but you have valid reasons why you could not arrive at a diagnosis or a proper diagnosis, why you missed some symptoms. You have a reason. The patient was there in a rural center. Connectivity was low. The courts are going to accept it. Please use this privilege which has been given to you.
Correct,
Yes.
sir. And how important is to mention the duration of the prescription when doing teleconsultation?
So now this has nothing to do with telemedicine practice guidelines. This has to do with your medical science. You have to write it down for how many days you can give it. That depends on your science. But yes, in the prescription, you obviously have to write it down. That this prescription is for 2 months, for 3 months, for 4 months. Yes.
Right, sir. And can a patient demand returning of fees if he feels unsatisfied with the teleconsultation?
So now let me put a question to you. In physical consultation, if the patient gets unsatisfied, are you going to return back the fees? No. I'm repeating myself. You are a professional. I am a lawyer. I am a professional. I give my time. I give my expertise. I charge for that. I am not charging for results. I am not charging for satisfaction. So you should be least bothered about that. Maybe you may add a line if you practice in some areas where patients keep on coming asking for refund. Telemedicine, once you start the call, no refund. Write it down in your initial email or WhatsApp message or whatever you said.
Correct, sir. And
Yes.
there are many questions, but we have time constraint. So the last question, can we insist on advance payment before we start teleconsultation?
So see, this has nothing to do with law, but as lawyers, we also insist on advance payment. So if your patients are all very holy and religious persons, you don't ask. Otherwise, asking for advance is always a good option, especially when the patient is not in front of you. In this virtual world, we never know. There is virtual money, virtual patient. I don't think that will help us in the real life. So you better take money in advance. Now that is a practical advice. It has nothing to do with law.
So thank you, sir, for giving us very insightful lecture and the practical hints. All the viewers have appreciated your talk. I thank you on behalf of
Thank you.
INTAS and our viewers.
Thank you so much, sir. And once again, I would like to inform all the viewers about the toll-free number which we have launched, which we will be sharing as soon as possible. Anybody needs legal help, there will be a panel working under the guidance of Mr. Bajpayee, and they would give you instant recommendations, suggestions based on the law. So thank you very much once again for joining this webinar, and thank you, Bajpayee sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.